So as John said, we decided to talk to some print advocates and find out what it is they love so much about their print copy, to deprive them of that print copy, and to find out what, if anything, would tip them over to reading their news and magazine content online. This was a small qualitative piece of study that we did. We deliberately recruited a group of people who we knew had access to the internet, either via smartphones, PCs, laptops, but they weren't using it to access their news. And we know that they regularly bought daily newspapers or weekly magazines. So we had a group discussion with them, found out what it is that they love so much about their printed edition, asked them what they thought might be the barriers for them to access online, and little to their knowledge, we then said, right, we don't want you to buy your newspaper this week. We want you to access what you would normally access, but via online channels only, either via your smartphone or online. And we then followed up with them a week later to find out how they'd got on, and then to introduce the idea of accessing such information on a tablet. So we'll come on to that in a bit. One of the first things that we found out really was that this is a tradition. It's something that is part of their daily routine, and it's just something that they do. It's very much that their grandfather bought a paper, their parents bought a paper, and now they do too. And it's not something that they consciously think about. It is just part of their routine. They very much look forward to reading it, and that might be during their travel into work. That might be just 10 minutes that they can get at their desk in their lunch hour, or it might be sitting at home in the evening and just having that moment of indulgence of having that time alone to themselves. It is the physicality of actually having the paper that they like. Regardless of whether they've dipped into a website during the day and picked up a bit of news, they like having the comfort and satisfaction of holding that newspaper. And there's a feeling that all of the news is in there. There's a finite amount of news that they can get to. It's the familiarity. They know the layout of the paper. They know they can turn straight to the back and get to the sports section. They can open the middle and get their celebrity gossip. It takes seconds. They need to learn how to navigate online. They need to learn how to where to find things. But there's a perception that will always take longer. Clicking and scrolling through and getting to that section isn't just like opening the physical paper. It's convenient. They can take it anywhere. They can read it when they like. As you'll see from the quote, with the newspaper, you can take it anywhere. Take it to the toilet. You can take it to bed with you. Whereas a laptop has to be charged and is heavy. The layout of the physical page, whereas online they were perceiving that if you read the headlines, you get all the news headlines, it can be quite depressing. They like the layout of the page, the serious depth story followed by the stupid satirical comedy story helps them keep perspective on their reading, helps them just to, be able to turn the page, and they quite like that. They quite like the layout and seeing the different things on the page, even though they have to flick through to get to the sections that they want to. It's the ability to share. It's a talking point. It's the ability to tear out articles and give them to friends and family. It's the ability to pass your newspaper round at work and talk about a story, something which they didn't think they would do if they'd read online or on their mobile. And for those who commuted into London, it's the protection. It may be very difficult sometimes to read your paper on a crowded train, but we've all been there and done it when you've got your paper, and it means you don't have to engage with anybody else. It's your personal space and your protection whilst commuting. So we asked people what their perceived barriers would be. If we asked them to look online, what did they think was going to be the problem for them? Firstly, there are those people who work at a computer all day. Staring at a screen and working at a computer all day, the last thing they want to have to do then is access and view the news on a computer. Part of reading their paper was very much about relaxing and unwinding and having that moment, something which doesn't sit very well with reading news on a screen. For those that had access to smartphones and Blackberries and iPhones, although the small screen allows them to quickly pick up a little bit of information, actually reading the whole newspaper on that small screen is very difficult. Then there's the perception that if you're reading online, it takes longer. The article may be the same length, but you have clicked through a series of links and you have clicked on relevant links, and before you know it, you're off looking at something completely different and you haven't read the news that you started out intending to read. They like the fact that if they sit down and read their paper, there's a finite amount of time and news to digest. There was also the issue for those people who travelled into London about having the signal on the tube. Obviously, if they've downloaded something, they can read it, but once you're on the tube, you're unable to click through as you would normally. The cost of buying a newspaper is absolutely considered loose change. It is not thought about really at all in terms of purchasing, with the exception of one reader who felt that the glossy magazines such as Hello and Vogue are still a luxury because of their cost. But the daily newspaper would still be considered loose change and not considered to be an issue at all. It's quite interesting that some of our readers that we were talking to were very price savvy when it came to their weekly shopping, finding bargains, collecting vouchers to get a bit of a discount. Yet even though their weekly spend on newspapers would be, in excess of about £6, this was absolutely considered part of their routine and not something that crossed their mind. As you can see from the quote, it's just back pocket change. While most online newspapers are currently available free of charge, the Times and some others do charge a subscription fee, which is cheaper than the daily price of purchasing the newspaper. However, for our readers, this was very much a barrier. The thought of having yet another monthly direct debit out of their account was an issue, whereas loose change out of their pocket, even though it equated to more, was the preferred option. So like I say, we asked readers to stop buying their newspapers and magazines for a week and to access what they would normally do so via their online routes, whatever they had access to. And whilst the initial access of finding the websites and the apps that they were looking for was easy, the navigational experience was considered very different. It was considered too much information, too congested. They didn't know where to start looking. And it sometimes took them a while to figure out they needed to click on tabs, they needed to click on headlines to get the stories. As you can see from the quote, I didn't find it easy. There's too much information. I was finding it difficult to navigate through each story. There was too much going on. Whilst there's a degree at which people need time to become familiar with things, even after a few days, they were unable to find what they were looking for, despite using the search function specifically designed for that newspaper they were trying to access. There's also a fear with their perception when they thought, oh, it's going to take me longer, I'm going to click through, I'm going to go off to other stories. That came true. But there's also then a sense of panic that you're going to miss out on not having read some of the news because you've got distracted. The fact that they can have the physicality of the newspaper means that they know they're going to get everything they need to. This lady said, I felt like I might miss something online, as there's so many bits to click on. Then you end up clicking on the useful previous links and you lose your way. With a newspaper, you know you can start it, you can read everything, and you know you won't miss anything. You have a panic on that you're going to forget to go back and read, whereas with the physical paper, you know you're not going to miss anything. It's that totality and completion. In terms of the content, whilst none of our readers did a direct comparison, because we'd asked them not to buy that physical paper, they were sceptical about what was online compared to what was on the paper. They felt that the online content was much more sensationalised. The overuse of images, the overuse of pictures, particularly with celebrity news, took away sometimes the impact that story would have in black and white without all of that. There's much more photos, there's more images, it's more sensationalised rather than the paper, as it's much more in the background. It trivialises the news and makes it almost cartoonish. There seems more celebrity. I can't describe it. It just put me off. I felt different. I didn't feel like I was reading a paper or proper news. Interestingly, this lady, after having seen the online version of the paper that she regularly buys, is now questioning her choice of paper. One positive comment about the content was the fact that if you have been away, you have missed the news, obviously you can go back and look at past links and past news stories that have come up and get up to speed, something that you can't do if you've looked at the newspaper. So as we said, we introduced them to the tablet, and this was a new device for all of our readers. So there was an initial excitement, oh wow, you know, and the initial excitement of using one was there. So we let them have a bit of a play and get used to it before we then tried to get them to actually look at the newspaper apps and the online access to the papers that they had been viewing over the past week. The size of the screen, the mobility, the lightweight of the device provided a flexibility that does come with the paper version. The technology of a tablet doesn't impact on their ability to consume the news in exactly the same way as they do with their newspaper. As you can see, I like that. I still sit on the sofa with my glass of wine, and that was a big thing for her, having her newspaper sat on the glass of wine, and the tablet enabled her to do that. What is interesting is that we asked the readers to access some of different apps, the way that different newspapers are presented online for the tablets. And the one that they liked the most was the one that presented the paper in a PDF format. So they were simply reading through. So although the tablet provides them with the ability to do all these interactive, flashy things, what they actually liked was having the paper. The very fact that they could download that paper to the tablet and then they could access it underground, and that's what they liked. There is also the fact that they can customize their news on apps and some of the online websites. The fact that they can put in their favourite football team and get the news stories about their football team was something that they liked. So the tablet really does have the potential to change the way that we think and consume about news. So while our readers have learnt more about accessing and consuming the news through various online platforms with mixed responses, the tablet does have potential to change readers' behaviour. But there's a strong feeling that regardless of online capacities, regardless of what comes up in the future, newspapers and the paper format will survive. And I'll just finish with this quote. Newspapers have survived the introduction of radio and television, and they will survive the internet.